Yeah, I'm kind of blacklisted. I haven't gotten a studio job in 15 years.
When people talk about big stars in Hollywood, Val Kilmer's name always comes up. He was in big hit movies, and it looked like he had it all: fame, talent, and looks. But something odd happened. He slowly started to vanish from the spotlight. Now, Mel Gibson is speaking out, saying Kilmer didn't just walk away. He said no to something dark. He didn't want to trade his soul for more fame. In a world where many will do anything to stay on top, Kilmer chose to stand alone. But why did Hollywood turn on him? And what was the real cost of saying no? Join us in this video as we discuss the details. Mel Gibson reveals the reason why Val Kilmer refused to sell his soul. Val Kilmer used to be one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. People knew his name, and they knew his face. He was in a lot of famous movies. He played big roles in films like Top Gun, The Doors, Tombstone, and even Batman Forever. For a while, it really looked like nothing could stop him. He had talent, he had looks, and he had the kind of screen presence that made people stop and pay attention. But then, something strange started to happen. Slowly, without much warning, Val Kilmer started to disappear from big movies. He wasn't being cast in major roles anymore. His name wasn't showing up like it used to. It was almost like he had vanished from the big screen. At first, some people thought maybe he just wanted to take a break. Maybe he was tired of all the fame and the pressure. But as time went on, it became clear that this wasn't just a short break. Val wasn't coming back to the spotlight the way people expected. In fact, it had been over 15 years since he was offered a major role in a studio film. And when people started asking why, the answers weren't very clear. Val himself has said that he believes he was blacklisted. That means he thinks someone, or maybe even a group of people, decided he should not be given work anymore. And not because he wasn't talented, not because he wasn't good at his job, but because he didn't want to play the game the way others did. He said that he used to speak out too much. He tried to do what he thought was right, not what was popular. And that may have made some powerful people upset. Mel Gibson, who has known Val for many years, agrees with him. Mel says Val didn't just fade away by accident. He believes Val was pushed out. He believes Val wouldn't go along with certain things that were happening behind the scenes in Hollywood. And because of that, the people in charge decided they didn't want to work with him anymore. Mel says Hollywood can be a strange place. He described it like a haunted saloon where people are afraid to speak too loudly or ask too many questions. And if you do, you might find yourself shut out, just like Val. There were stories in the press that said Val was hard to work with. One director even called him rude and said he was difficult on set. But lots of actors have been called difficult before, and most of them still get work. So why was Val treated so differently? That's a question that doesn't have a clear answer. But when you look at the pattern, it starts to look more suspicious. Around the same time Val stopped getting work, other actors also seemed to vanish. Wesley Snipes went to jail over taxes. Brendan Fraser stepped away after speaking out about something personal. Mel Gibson himself faced serious backlash after directing The Passion of the Christ, a movie that made a lot of money but also stirred up a lot of controversy. Mel says that after that, he couldn't get studios to support his projects. He had to use his own money just to keep making films. So it wasn't just Val. It seemed like anyone who made too much noise or asked the wrong questions was being pushed out. There's also talk about bigger, darker things going on behind the scenes in Hollywood. Some people think there are secret groups or powerful individuals who control more than we realize. There are rumors about people being invited to private parties where bad things happen, and if you say no, they make sure your career goes away. Val was always someone who did what he thought was right. He didn't like to follow the crowd. Maybe he was invited to those things and said no. Maybe he saw something he didn't like. Nobody knows for sure. But the fact that he was suddenly gone from Hollywood with no clear reason has made people start asking questions. What really happened during his time away from the big screen, and how did his health affect his journey back into the public eye? Let's delve deeper. Val Kilmer's return, health struggles, and his untold story. There's also the story about the movie Sound of Freedom. That film was finished in 2018. It's about a very serious topic, child trafficking. But for some reason, it didn't get released for a long time. It was supposed to come out through a big studio, but when that studio was bought by Disney, the film disappeared. It wasn't until years later that it was finally released, and it made a lot of money. Still, many big media outlets criticized the film. Some said it was just feeding conspiracy theories. Others said it was dangerous. But the people behind the movie, and those who supported it, believe it was buried on purpose. Mel Gibson stood by the movie and the real-life story it was based on. He believes the film was hidden because it got too close to something the powerful people didn't want exposed. After many years away from big roles, Val Kilmer returned briefly in Top Gun: Maverick. He played Iceman again, the character he made famous years earlier. But it wasn't like before. His scene in the film was short, but it was emotional. It reminded people of how much they had missed him. Even though he made that small return, Val didn't stay in the spotlight. He became more reserved and quiet. He published a documentary titled Val in 2021. It was created from films he had taken at home over the years. You could tell how much he had changed in the movie. He appeared aged, feeble, and exhausted. However, he still possessed a powerful, honest quality. He wasn't merely flaunting his positive aspects of life. He was also sharing the difficult bits. He seemed to want everyone to know his true identity and the circumstances surrounding his demise. On April 1st, Val Kilmer passed away. The official reason was pneumonia, but the report from the coroner said a lot more. It talked about infections, open wounds that hadn't healed, and signs of malnutrition. There were also prescription pills found in his system, which suggests he was in a lot of pain. Some people wonder if he had just given up. Maybe he felt like no one was listening anymore. Maybe he didn't want to keep fighting. Mel Gibson believes Val died because of what Hollywood did to him. He believes Val was punished for not going along with the system. And he's not the only one. More and more people are starting to speak out about how the industry treats those who step out of line. They say that if you ask too many questions or if you try to tell the truth, you get pushed out. You lose your job. You lose your platform. Sometimes, you even lose your life. Val Kilmer was not just a movie star. He was someone who tried to stay true to himself, even when it cost him everything. He didn't play the game the way others did, and for that, he may have paid the ultimate price. His story is a reminder that sometimes the brightest stars are the ones that burn out the fastest, not because they were weak, but because they refused to be anything other than who they really were. So, with all the fame and talent he had, what really caused Val Kilmer to suddenly step away from Hollywood? Was it just bad luck? Or is there more to the story than people think? Let's find out. The silence and the sudden change. In a video that came out not too long ago, there was a man named Tony who was talking about something that really made him feel sad. He looked very sad as he said that Val Kilmer, the well-known actor, had passed away. Tony said that Kilmer was 65 years old at the time of his death. Kilmer had been sick for quite a while before that. Back in the year 2015, Kilmer found out he had throat cancer. At first, he didn't tell many people about it. He kept it to himself. But after some time passed, people found out. He ended up having surgery. They gave him a tracheotomy, which is a special kind of surgery on the neck that helps people breathe. But because of that surgery, it became really hard for him to talk. Talking was not easy for him in the years after the surgery. Later on, his daughter, whose name is Mercedes, came forward and said that her dad, Val Kilmer, had died in Los Angeles. She said he died from problems caused by pneumonia. That's an illness where the lungs get infected and it becomes hard to breathe. It's serious, especially if someone is already sick or weak. Now, Tony, the man in the video, said something that shows he really cared about Kilmer as an actor. He said that Kilmer had always been one of his favorite actors of all time. He remembered a lot about him. He talked about how Kilmer loved movies ever since he was a kid. He would record things with a camera and try to make his own little movies. He had a big love for film. He spent a lot of time filming his life and things around him. He kept a lot of tapes and videos. He always wanted to be involved in movies and creating them. Then Tony started talking about Kilmer's career, and that's when things got more serious. He said there was something unclear that happened around the year 1999. Before that year, Kilmer had been doing really well. He was getting big roles in popular movies. He was really popular and doing well. But then, all of a sudden, that stopped. Tony said it was like a switch had been flipped. After 1999, Kilmer started being in smaller movies. Most of them didn't come out in theaters. They went straight to DVD, which usually means they didn't have big budgets or wide releases. Tony thought that was somehow. He didn't think it made any sense for someone so amazing and famous to just stop getting big movie roles. He said it looked like it happened too fast and for no clear reason. So he started thinking if maybe something else was going on that no one knew about. He brought up some ideas and theories he had. He mentioned other big names like Mel Gibson and Wesley Snipes. Both of those actors were also really famous and doing well in the 1990s. But then, around the same time as Kilmer, they also started getting fewer big roles. Their careers changed too. But if we really stop and think for a moment, was it just one reason? Or were there quiet signs, little patterns and hidden clues, soft whispers that told us he was slowly stepping away long before anyone truly noticed? Keep watching to find out. Patterns, theories, and quiet exits. Tony talked more about Mel Gibson's path. Gibson had been in a lot of huge movies. He was in Signs and also made The Passion of the Christ. But after those films, his career slowed down a lot. He wasn't in big movies like he used to be. Tony said that Gibson had been making his own films too, like writing and directing. That might have helped him stay successful for a little longer, but even he couldn't avoid the same kind of slowdown that Kilmer went through. Tony said Wesley Snipes had a similar story. Snipes had been a big star too, but his career took a hit when he got in trouble for not paying taxes. He ended up going to prison. But Tony said that Snipes had claimed it wasn't really his fault. He said his accountant gave him bad advice. So Tony started to wonder, was this all just a coincidence? Or was there something else happening that we couldn't see? Then Tony brought up a movie that came out in 1999. It was called Eyes Wide Shut, and it starred Tom Cruise. It was directed by Stanley Kubrick, who was a famous filmmaker. The movie was about secret parties and mysterious people wearing masks. There have been a lot of rumors about what that movie was really trying to say. Some people think it was showing something real about powerful people in the world. Tony thought it was interesting that the movie came out in 1999, which is the same year Kilmer's career started to change. Tony also mentioned something else that had been in the news. Stories about private jets flying to an island where illegal things were happening. He didn't say names, but most people know those stories. Those reports became more common around the early 2000s, so Tony wondered if maybe these things were all connected somehow. He said maybe Kilmer, Gibson, and Snipes didn't want to be part of the wrong crowd. Maybe they refused to go along with things they didn't agree with. And maybe because of that, they stopped being offered the same kinds of movie roles. Tony made it clear he didn't have proof, but he said it was something that looked like a pattern. He also brought up a movie called The Expendables 3, which came out in 2014. That movie had both Mel Gibson and Wesley Snipes in it. Tony said it seemed like the man who made the movie, Sylvester Stallone, might have been trying to give those two actors another shot at being in a big film. But even after that, they didn't really return to the same level of fame they had before. To finish off, Tony talked about an interview Mel Gibson did in 2024. In the interview, Gibson talked about Braveheart, which was one of his most famous movies. He also talked about winning an Oscar and mentioned that he didn't hold grudges. Tony said he found that part of the interview interesting, especially when thinking about everything that had happened to Gibson's career. So, in the end, Tony's video was really about asking questions. He was wondering if something deeper was going on in Hollywood. He wasn't saying for sure, but he had a strong feeling that some actors might have been pushed out because they said no to things they didn't believe in. And to him, Val Kilmer's story seemed to fit that same pattern. When you think back to the 1980s and all the rising stars that lit up the screen, one question stands out. How did Val Kilmer, the most unpredictable of them all, carve out his own place in Hollywood? Stay tuned for more. The unclassifiable star of the 1980s. If you were someone who spent time watching movies during the 1980s, especially as you were growing up during that time, you might have found Val Kilmer to be kind of a strange or unusual actor when compared to the other young actors in Hollywood whose careers really started to take off back in those years. When you looked at actors like Tom Cruise, Sean Penn, Kevin Bacon, Emilio Estevez, Robert Downey Jr., John Cusack, or Tom Hanks, just to name a few of the stars who became famous around that time, Kilmer didn't exactly seem to fit into any of the usual boxes. He wasn't what people would call a big, strong, tough guy action hero. And he also wasn't the kind of guy who easily played a charming, smooth-talking heartbreaker. At the same time, he didn't really give off that deep, moody, intense kind of energy like actors who followed a dramatic, emotional acting style. And even though he could be funny, he didn't always jump out as someone who could just make people laugh instantly every time he showed up on screen. In some strange and interesting way, Val Kilmer was kind of like a mix of all these types of actors all at once, which made him really hard to describe or label. He was, most of the time, a really skilled actor who could take on all kinds of different characters, what people usually call a character actor. But he also had the handsome, good-looking face of someone who could lead a movie. He could really become the characters he played, and most of those roles always seemed to have something a little sharp or unusual about them. The movies that people remember most when they think about Val Kilmer were often big, well-known hits that lots of people liked. But in those movies, even though they were popular, Kilmer still managed to keep a bit of his strange, unique style. He had light blonde hair and a strong jawline that made him look like someone who just finished surfing at the beach in Malibu. But when you watched him act in movies, you could feel something deeper, like he wasn't always comfortable or fully confident, and that made him seem more real and more human, even though he looked like a movie star. That kind of honest, emotional feeling might be the thing that stuck with people the most when they thought about him, especially since he became even more well-known during the 1990s, which was the time when he reached the top of the box office world. Kilmer always gave every role his all. He didn't hold back. He wanted everything to be just right, and because of that, people sometimes said he was hard to work with. Still, even with that reputation, he couldn't really be put into a box like many other actors from his time. He wasn't easy to label. When he finally got a chance to go after those big famous roles that every actor wanted, like the time he stepped in to play Batman after Michael Keaton in Joel Schumacher's movie Batman Forever, he didn't enjoy it at all. As we dive deeper into his career, what do these patterns and theories reveal about Kilmer's choices? To learn more, keep watching, diving into darkness and embracing the strange. But the role that really seemed to define who Kilmer was as an actor, the one where he became so lost in the character that it was almost hard to tell where the character ended, and Kilmer began, was when he played Jim Morrison in The Doors, Oliver Stone's 1991 film about the famous rock band. Kilmer took the job very seriously. Just like Timothée Chalamet did for his role in A Complete Unknown, Kilmer spent a full year learning everything he could about Morrison. He didn't just want to act like him, he wanted to sound like him too. In the movie, the voice you hear is a mix of Kilmer's voice and old recordings of Morrison. Kilmer even studied how Morrison acted when he was high and out of control, both on stage and behind the scenes. But unlike Chalamet, who got nominated for an Oscar, Kilmer didn't get that kind of recognition. The only award he was up for was an MTV Movie Award. Jim Morrison, the character he played, seemed to be the one that felt the most like Kilmer himself. Morrison had a way of pulling people in, with charm and good looks. But he was also a little weird, and had a darker side. For Kilmer, that darker side may have partly come from a deep sadness he carried with him after losing his younger brother, Wesley, who passed away in 1977. There's a part in the movie where Morrison says, "I am the Lizard King. I can do anything." When he says that, you believe him, and you believe that Kilmer believed it too. That strange, mysterious, and maybe a little bit wild part of Kilmer's personality might have been what kept him from becoming as big as actors like Tom Cruise or Tom Hanks. But it was also the thing that made him seem more real, more genuine, and not fake like some other stars. As time went on, and his most famous days in the 90s faded away, Kilmer kept taking on roles that stood out because they were just so strange and unexpected. He played a bizarre private detective named Gay Perry in Kiss, Kiss, Bang, Bang, a movie by Shane Black. He acted alongside Nicolas Cage in Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, directed by Werner Herzog, where both characters were completely off the wall. He was a laid-back, marijuana-smoking father in Palo Alto, a film by Gia Coppola. He also played a confused writer who gets caught up in a wild and scary situation in Francis Ford Coppola's horror movie, Twixt. Even when the roles were strange or didn't make sense to everyone, Kilmer always gave them depth and seriousness. He never held back. Even if the movies weren't big hits, it was still exciting to see him show up and bring his own special mix of charm and craziness to the screen. Like the song by Jim Morrison that says, "People are strange," Kilmer seemed to live by those words during the later part of his acting life. Maybe he didn't become as huge as some of the other stars from the 1980s, but he turned into something even more rare, an actor who was so original and so different that we could look past his perfect appearance and really see the artist inside. Val Kilmer's life and career was not so smooth sailing. He had his own fair share of tragedy. What more is there to know? Keep watching for more details. The broken roots, heartache, and early wounds that shaped Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer's life has always been filled with deep emotions, and much of that began when he was just a little boy. He was born into a family with two brothers, and for a while life seemed normal. But when he was only 9 years old, everything changed. That was the year his parents got divorced. It was hard on him. After the divorce, Val and his brothers went to live with their dad. That might sound simple, but it wasn't. Val once said that his father was quiet and kept to himself. That made it difficult for young Val to connect with him. Over time, their relationship became distant, almost like they were strangers living under the same roof. Growing up in that kind of household left Val feeling isolated. He didn't feel seen or heard the way a child should. But out of that loneliness came something unexpected. He started to fall in love with acting. Maybe it was a way to escape, or maybe it helped him express feelings he couldn't talk about at home. Whatever the reason, it gave him something to hold on to when his world was falling apart. He began taking drama classes as a young boy. That's where he started learning how to bring emotions to life through stories and characters. Then, when Val was only 17 years old, something tragic happened. Something that stayed with him forever. His younger brother, Wesley, who had epilepsy, suffered a seizure and drowned in a swimming pool. Losing Wesley was a heartbreak that words can barely describe. They had been close. Wesley was creative like Val, and they shared a deep bond. That sudden, terrible loss hit Val hard. It was the kind of pain that doesn't really go away. It just settles quietly inside you and becomes part of who you are. That same year, even in the middle of his grief, Val got accepted into Juilliard in New York City. It was a big deal. He was the youngest student ever admitted at the time. It should have been a time of great joy, but he was still hurting over Wesley and still carrying the weight of his broken home life. Even as his talent grew, so did the emotional scars. Years later, Val thought he had found love and stability when he met actress Joanne Whalley on the set of Willow in the late 1980s. They had chemistry both on and off the screen, and before long, they got married. Together, they had 2 children, Mercedes and Jack. For a while, it looked like Val had found the family he'd always wanted. But that happiness didn't last. The marriage slowly started falling apart. Joanne suspected Val of cheating, and the trust between them began to disappear. Around that time, Val had also started dating supermodel Cindy Crawford in public, which didn't help things. The final straw came when Val was working on The Island of Dr. Moreau. Joanne sent him divorce papers while he was on set. That hurt. Val later admitted that his intense acting style, especially his method acting, might have made it hard for Joanne to live with him. While filming The Doors, he spent nearly a year acting like Jim Morrison all the time, even at home. That kind of dedication to a role can be impressive, but it also takes a toll on relationships. The divorce was messy and painful, and it wasn't the only time Val struggled with relationships. Even before his marriage, he'd experienced heartbreak. In the 1980s, he dated singer and actress Cher. They were close, and Val once said her loyalty never faded. But it was another actress, Daryl Hannah, who left the deepest scar. They fell in love while filming Hard Cash, and Val thought their connection was something rare. They spent quiet time together at his home in New Mexico, just enjoying each other's company. But like many things in his life, it ended in sadness. When Daryl moved on and later married Neil Young, Val said he still loved her, but also admitted he hated her for leaving him. Even though he found success in Hollywood and starred in huge movies, Val Kilmer never really escaped the emotional weight of his early years. It shaped who he was, not just as an actor, but as a person. And even now, all those memories from his childhood, the heartbreak from his divorce, and the people he's lost still echo in his life. What do you think about the idea that Val Kilmer might have been blacklisted by Hollywood? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video shown on your screen to catch up on your favorite celebrity stories. See you there.